Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Diversity and Inclusion in the Workplace, sponsored by the Central Valley Regional HR Hotline. My name is Stephanie Neely. I'm the Marketing Director here at California Employers Association. As you can see, your audio is muted, but there will be lots of opportunities to engage during the training through the chat box and polls that will be launched. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box at any time, and we will address them as we go. Handouts for this presentation will be dropped into the chat box shortly. Once you see the icon in the chat, you can click it and it will download. This webinar will be recorded and will be sent out to you later from the Workforce Development Board. We will also be inviting you to share your feedback at the end of today's training by participating in a brief survey. It's only 5 questions. It takes less than 2 minutes. I promise it's very short. We would love to get your feedback. It helps us make sure we are meeting your expectations and lets us know what trainings you'd like to see in the future. Now I'd like to introduce your trainer for today. We have the wonderful Miss Keisha Hansen, one of our Human Resource Directors here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Keisha.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. Just want to again acknowledge your hotline with the Central Valley counties, which are all listed here, and remind you that we do partner with them to provide you a hotline for free at no cost to you. And for each county, there's a separate number. You can use this number to call any of our HR directors, subject matter experts, any questions compliance related, employee relations related, and hopefully they can assist you. In addition, these are just some suggestions on what Central Valley offers you. So those are included in your handout, so take a look. And if you are joining us for the very first time, just very briefly, a little information about California Employers Association. We are a human resource association. We serve employers throughout the state of California, all different sizes, all different industries. And really our goal and our mission is to provide employers with peace of mind through our human resource compliance solutions. We do trainings such as this one. We can come to your location and do a customized training if you're interested. We can do it virtually. We can do it on site. We also offer executive coaching services. So if any of that piqued your interest and you want to know more, you can use one of those 1-800 numbers to find out more information. And I want to give our lawyers peace of mind by letting you know that I am not a lawyer, and this presentation should not be relied upon as legal advice. If you are in the market to find an attorney, we do partner with several attorneys throughout the state. So give us a call again at one of those 800 numbers, and hopefully we can connect you with someone in your area. With that said, what are we talking about today? Diversity and inclusion. You know, getting a bad rap these days. They're not just buzzwords. They're still in existence. We can still say them. And diversity and inclusion still play, hopefully you are aware, still play a key role in shaping our workforce, in helping our workforces be healthy and thriving. They help in terms of retaining employees and keeping them engaged. So we'll just kind of talk about a few things. Really, what is diversity and inclusion these days? What is the impact of bias and stereotypes at work, which could be a whole nother training, probably an all-day training. And then we'll talk about strategies to cultivate that diverse and inclusive work culture. Hopefully you're already invested in this, but maybe some of you are refreshing and trying to look for new ways to foster that inclusive work environment. So with that said, I'm going to start out by kind of gauging what you think is important when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So you should be getting the poll up. Maybe not, Stephanie, because I'm not a co-host. There we go. Thank you. So when it comes to creating a diverse and inclusive workplace, what do you think is most important? Of course, you could do multiple, but this is a single choice answer. So really think about it. Maybe it's something that inspired you to attend this presentation? So think about one that maybe you're thinking of focusing on, or you just think is important in general. Um, it's a busy time, it's a chaotic time for everyone right now, and for a lot of leaders. We're distracted by other focuses that are taking up priorities, but it's always important to keep this in the forefront of our minds. So just giving you a couple more seconds to answer this, then I'll share. So this is cool. This is great. So over 67% of you said ensuring everyone feels a sense of belonging. So that gives me an idea that you already kind of know the impact that that can have on employees in a variety of ways. So that's great. And then 33% for promoting equal opportunities for growth and advancement, right? Uh, Part of creating that sense of belonging is giving people that hope, that there are opportunities for them to grow within the organization, and fill positions that would be available. So these are a couple of things we will touch on today. Thank you for your participation. And again, as Stephanie mentioned, any questions that come up for you, feel free to put those in the chat. So I'm going to start just with a definition of diversity, which many of us just kind of go to automatically when we think of diversity. We think of what we see, right? What comes up for us visually immediately. If you've ever taken a diversity and inclusion course, they usually talk about the iceberg model. And when you are thinking about what you can see visually, that's really just the tip of the iceberg of who we are. That tip of the iceberg would include, our racial differences, our ethnicity, our gender, our age. But we are a whole lot more than that as human beings, right? So really, who we are as a human really lies below the surface of that iceberg model. It really encompasses where we grew up, who our parents were, where we went to school, where we lived, who were we exposed to, what education we had, what personalities, how are we hardwired, really encompasses that diversity. And what has traditionally happened with diversity and inclusion for a lot of companies is they focus on increasing the number of a diverse workforce, and increasing the number of underrepresented employees, which is amazing because it's important and it matters. But they don't necessarily focus on that inclusion portion. And if you look at the slide and you see, is this British Bake Off? There's a lot of ingredients to make a great cake there. Well, think of that diverse workforce, which you may already have because of your demographics. And they represent all of those amazing ingredients on the slide, on the graphic, right? You want to make that great cake, you want to make that great pumpkin spice pie for Thanksgiving. And on their own, they're each individually wonderful. I love brown sugar, I love cinnamon. But in order to make that delicious cake or that cinnamon spice pie, you have to incorporate the ingredients. So touching on what a lot of you want to focus on and think is important is that inclusivity portion. And a lot of research has been done on diverse and inclusive workplaces, and they show that when you truly embrace a diverse and inclusive workforce, you're more successful, you're more creative, you're more innovative, you're more productive. You're really focusing on the organization as a whole and making sure that everybody feels valued and included. And if you look at an organization, there are so many multiple layers of differences within us, which you start off smack dab in the middle, our personalities, how we're hardwired. We're all different. When we come into the workplace and we're hired, we usually don't know who we're going to be working with very well. And so we're bringing everything into the workplace of our backgrounds, what other industries we've worked in, our work styles, all of that, which I'm sure some of you have experienced, can be challenging at times. Sometimes we do have different work styles from each other. We have different backgrounds. And how do you mesh those? How do you really make those inclusive so that person doesn't feel isolated? Can be challenging. And we get calls CAA a lot of times about, oh gosh, I have these two employees, they don't really get along because one likes this way of doing things and the other person does it this way. And that could be based on their personality. Then the second dimension is the internal dimensions, right? These are the things we really don't have control over. We don't have control over what race we are, when we were born, our age, our gender, our physical abilities, which those tend to get scrutinized more, right? Judged, stereotyped, a lot of assumptions made about that layer. And then the third layer is the external dimensions, which we do as humans and individuals have a little bit more control of, but can still be scrutinized, judged, assumed. Our marital status, our personal status, how we look, how we show up in the workplace, our educational background, our beliefs. So layer after layer after layer can be really complex, right? When we bring that into the workplace. And then the fourth layer is our organizational dimensions. And sometimes we don't think of that, how different it can be when you're in a position of leadership. Maybe you're part of the executive team. And if you're an entry level employee, right? Sometimes there's some division there. We hear about that at CEA sometimes. Um, my leadership doesn't know that this is going on, or I don't know how to bring this up. So there's a lot of different layers to who we are as individuals and humans. And in order to create that really inclusive work environment, we have to work on how do we mesh all of those? How do we create that foundation of respect and trust, to respect what is the difference in people? So what is inclusion? Well, inclusion really does involve bringing that diversity, those diverse forces together, and resources in a way that is beneficial for everybody, which leads up to that sense of belonging. It really puts that practice of diversity into action by creating that environment where people can get involved. That foundation of respect that's always there. We know what the policies are. We know what the code of conduct is. We know that there's an element also of human connection, which is really important, especially these days when we're in a hybrid and remote world. It's harder for people to connect. It's harder for people to get to know each other and to know what people's work styles are, how they like things done, and just what are their interests as human beings. So remember that cake and all those ingredients. It really is about making the mix work, right? Acknowledging that we all have different strengths, which are amazing contributors and benefits to have in a workplace. We don't want everybody who looks the same, talks the same, has the same ideas, because that's not where creativity and innovation, and a healthy work environment exists. So someone who is the VP of diversity at Netflix always said, it's not about inviting people to the party, but it's also about asking them to dance, which I always thought that kind of brought things home, in addition to making the mix work for that delicious cake. So as many of you focused on those elements of belonging, which is so important, it's really a human need. It's part of our human nature. We have that sense of wanting to belong either as a part of our family, or a chosen family that we have, or our community. We want to have a sense that we belong to our community, our faith, or also our workplace, because most of us are working for many hours a week, and spend a lot of our time and lifetime in our workplaces. So we want to have those elements of belonging. And those start with being seen. When you feel seen at work, what that means is you're recognized on a regular basis, either by your peers, your colleagues, your supervisors, maybe customers or clients. You could be rewarded. And also, there's just a sense of respect that colleagues understand what you do. What's your part in contributing to the overall success of the company? So when you start feeling seen, and imagine, when you have a new employee and you're in the onboarding process, that immediately they start to see that demonstrated within the workplace, that they see and hear people being valued, being included in conversations and meetings, asking for people's ideas and thoughts, that's really demonstrating to that employee that what was said during the interview process is really matching up. So when we feel seen, then we start connecting with other people. And it doesn't mean you have to have every single employee be your best friend, but you do make some human connections. And there's some people that maybe you just get along with, that you really have some commonalities. So when you're connected at work, you have those positive interactions, those people you can go to. Hopefully, it is your managers and your leaders, because when you have an issue or problem, hopefully you have built that trust by connecting on a regular basis with your employees or with your managers, so that when there are those issues or problems, you feel really safe to bring those to someone. When you feel seen and connected, the next one is feeling supported, demonstrating that environment where, we have your back, right? We're not going to play the blame game. We're not going to create that ego blame centered, oh, it's all, Stephanie's fault. We're going to support you. We're going to ask you what you need, what tools, what resources, what training you need in order to do your job. And we're going to make it a safe environment so that when something does happen, or when you don't have the resources you need, or when you just didn't understand the instructions, that you're able to say, hey, I need some help here. Or when people are overwhelmed, a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed these days and might be understaffed. So, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed with work. Is anybody free to lend me a hand? There's no other feeling than knowing that your colleagues and peers and your management has your back in those instances, that they're just going to dive right in and say, yes, let me help you with that. And there's no repercussions, there's no stigma. People are just really helping each other. When you feel seen, when you feel connected, when you feel supported, and you feel proud, um, then you feel proud. Then you start really recognizing, hey, this company is really looking out for my best interests. And when you're proud, you usually feel aligned with the values, purpose, and the vision of the company itself. So, in the chat, just really quick, as we're talking about belonging, what are some everyday behaviors or actions that help people feel valued and included at work that maybe we didn't touch on already? Maybe something you're doing specifically or intentionally within your organization that has really made an impact on people feeling like they belong, feeling like they can bring their true selves to work. Love to hear from you on that. And it gives me an indication that you're not multitasking. While you do that, sometimes there is kind of a division in terms of what is our leadership doing about diversity and inclusion, or how can I convince my organization that it really matters. So here's just a few statistics. As I said, there's been a lot of research done, and one of the results was that cognitive diversity. So when we have a diverse workforce, that also includes diversity of thought, right? Because of how we grew up and our background and everything, we have different ways of thinking from everybody else. Not everybody thinks the same way you do. When we have that in a workplace, it can enhance team innovation by 20%, which is pretty relevant right now, because I feel like we're just in a constant flux of change, which requires a lot of organizations and businesses to be innovative. Another statistic over on the far right is that we're the most diverse workforce we've ever been. 48% of Gen Z are racially or ethnically diverse, not to mention just growing up a different way than those of us who are older in a different generation, right? So they're bringing different things to the table. 72% of employees will leave a job for one that's more inclusive, because inclusivity means that we're building a healthy work environment, right? We're creating that safe environment so people can really thrive and not just survive. And if you've ever been in that work environment that wasn't healthy, where you just felt like you didn't belong and you weren't able to do your best work, then you probably weren't that happy outside of work either. So we really want to be able to focus on that. And then not surprising that our job seekers these days are really looking for workplaces that consider diversity an important factor when considering employment opportunities. So these are some things from Pew Research, also Deloitte Research, that you can look up that can be really impactful. Oh, I love that, Lorraine. Yes, yes, that's a great point too. Taco Thursday and including people who are off site. Because we may have different work environments, but sometimes it's easier to focus on the people who are right in front of us if we're on site than people who are in remote or hybrid situations. So always keeping people united and thinking of those people as well, right? So that we're consistent. Um, Making me hungry now. And then another thing to add is just the benefits of a diverse and inclusive culture. Again, it means greater innovation. We're able to problem solve because we have that diversity of thought and diversity of experiences and backgrounds. When you feel safe, when you feel that sense of belonging, and you connect with other people, it usually incorporates stronger team collaboration, right? That feeling of support that I have your back, you have my back. In our meetings at CEA in my department, when somebody has a heavier load, they're welcome to talk about it in our meetings and say, gosh, I'm working on too many employer handbooks right now. Can someone help me take it off my plate? So there's no stigma in saying I have too much on my plate, or for someone to say, gosh, I don't have as much going on this week for me. I'm happy to help anybody that needs my support. That's a great uniter, and people feel that sense of team collaboration, and again, that just someone has my back. Improved employee engagement when I feel seen, supported, recognized, valued, heard. I can contribute my ideas. I'm usually going to be more engaged in my job. And for those of us who have been in unhealthy work environments, it's really hard to feel 100% engaged. We might like our actual job, but there's so much going on around us that it really can influence how we work. It can also lead to an expanded talent pool if we're casting that broader net to get that diversity of thought and diversity of backgrounds, education, ethnicity, race, all of those things together. It can expand our talent pool, and it can provide that positive brand reputation if we're doing it right, right? If we're doing it right, it can really impact retention for employers, which is a huge um, challenge for a lot right now. So, what's holding us back? What are some barriers to creating that diverse and inclusive workplace? Any thoughts? Put them in the chat. But a big one is really our own bias, right? And again, as I said, this could be a whole day or week of training on our bias, but we all have it. It's okay. We're human. We have it. It's really our brain that's trying to make some quick connections, right? When something new appears to us, a person, a situation, our brain is trying to make a connection about that really fast because of that fight or flight mode. But it's really just based on our own previous experience and perceptions, not based in fact, right? So that's usually happens with our unconscious bias. Obviously, there's also conscious bias when we know we're being a certain way about a person or a situation, and that can get kind of messy, right? Um, how that shows up at work is usually through micro messages. And micro messages are signals that we send to one another through our behaviors, through how we talk, how we communicate. Um, they're called micro because the behaviors can be small. And again, if we're unconscious about it, we don't realize what we're saying or doing is possibly offending someone else. But the impact can be enormous. And when I've done these trainings on site, I remember once talking about micro messages, and a micro inequity might be, you work at the front desk and someone comes in from like the corporate office and they pass by you, they don't even stop or say hi, they don't know your name, and they come in all the time. That could be considered a micro inequity, right? The person doesn't realize they're doing it. Maybe they're just rushing to get to that meeting. But the person that is at the reception is having a different interpretation and perception, that the person doesn't care about them, that they're assuming that they're less than. And that has happened to me, having worked at a front desk before. And I was in a training, and the person that was the receptionist came up to me afterwards, and she said, "I felt like you were talking directly to me," because that's what happened. So sometimes they're unconscious. We don't realize we're doing them, and they can show up either as microaggressions, which are those exchanges that really send some denigrating messages to people, make them feel like they don't belong. Or can show up as micro inequities, which again could be just a message we send that causes someone to feel, again, like I'm being slighted, I'm being discouraged. The example of being at the front desk, devalued. When I worked at the front desk, it was part of a shopping center, and I was actually um, sitting in for people at times, and I was actually the manager of the customer service. So I had a lot of good intel information about that. And the person that walked by me all the time was from corporate and never knew my name, never talked to me. And I could have really helped him. I could have really offered a lot of good information and advice. But it's that, again, creating that environment where people feel safe and feel valued. What we really want to focus on is micro affirmations, which goes back to some of those elements of belonging, which are messages that we send through our communication, our behavior, our actions that cause people to feel valued, included, or encouraged. That message in the chat that Lorraine, she's thinking of everybody, not just the people that are going to be on site, but she's also thinking about the people off site to make sure that they feel included in the Taco Thursday. I mean, I would probably feel pretty slighted if I worked in and didn't know that I was going to benefit from that Taco Thursday. So they're little, but they can have quite a punch. And these are just a few examples. You may have observed them, you may have experienced them. Micro inequities, taking more questions from men than women during a meeting. Sometimes it can be a newer employee that we assume they don't have a lot to offer. I was at an on-site training last year, and it was on multi-generations in the workplace. And I had a couple of people from Gen Z, and this one young gentleman said he was just starting in his position. He'd been there about 6 months. And he said, I just really feel like I don't have a voice. I really am not asked a lot about my opinion. I don't feel that if I initiated it, my voice would be valued or recognized. So that's something that would create not that sense of belonging. It would feel that sense of exclusion. Mispronouncing a person's name, continually interrupting. And some of these, again, are just human habits. I have a habit sometimes of interrupting people, and it can cause people to feel like, well, gosh, she doesn't think what I'm saying is important. So it can cause those rifts, right? Again, they can be small, but they can have a huge impact. And then the micro affirmations, which can create that sense of inclusion and belonging, recognizing each other's achievements, right? Letting people know that you value what they contribute to the overall success of your team, your organization. Um, Being friendly. We're all in such a rush these days. We're having more meetings than ever. Sometimes I go into a meeting and people don't even say hi or how are you, good morning. And those could be considered, gosh, having that human connection is so important. Are we not focusing on that for a little bit at least? Inviting others to share their opinion, right? Inviting the new employees to different meetings at different levels so they can understand what's going on within the workplace, and that they can feel that their opinion matters and that they'll continue to share their opinions and ideas. When they do that, when they feel that, even if a different decision is made about a project or about a way to go, you'll get more buy-in and commitment when people know that they actually were um, given that opportunity to share their opinions. And then accommodating diverse work styles. Again, we're all bringing a lot into the workplace, and we all have different work styles. Some of us like to work socially. We like to engage. We like to be on site. We like to engage in conversations with people. Other of us are really focused on projects. We like to really put our head to the grindstone. and work independently, but if we need help, we'll ask for it. And we are all interdependent on each other if we're working on teams, if we're working in different organizations. So we need to learn how people work and what do they need from us in order to accommodate some of those work styles. Another way bias shows up at work is through stereotypes. And I'm not even going to ask you because I'm sure you all can fill in the blank. But stereotypes are still perpetuated in the workplace, either in not appropriate for work jokes or just sharing with a colleague. Again, maybe the unconscious bias or the conscious bias. And some of them you may think, well, that's a positive comment I made about that person or that group of people. But whether they're negative or positive, they're really leading us to make inaccurate judgments. Again, we're not basing these in fact. We just heard from a friend or we experienced one person that did that, and now we're creating that stereotype. And they definitely have an impact on our workplace because they essentially stereotype a lump of people together and ignore their individual unique skills, strengths, personalities, and backgrounds and experiences. Um, we need to focus on that individual, right? What are their individual strengths that they're able to contribute? We want to define people by who they are and their abilities, not just what we've heard or what we've seen previously. But could you fill in all the blanks? Was there one you had a question on? So another way bias impacts the workplace is definitely through the hiring process. Is well known that it can be a consistent source of unconscious bias. Uh, there's many studies that have been done, but the one that's shown on your screen is a study that was done on resumes and showing that people who appeared to have white names and backgrounds, even people make assumptions about our backgrounds, are 36% more likely than Black Americans with the same credentials to get a call back. So much, can be misconstrued when you're looking and skimming through resumes. If you've ever been a part of hiring and you screen those resumes, it can be hard. Sometimes we see names and we assume that person is a male, but they're actually a female with a male sounding name. You might assume someone is of a certain ethnicity and they're really not. Back in the day, I used to work in hospitality and I would screen a lot of people over the phone. And when they heard my name, Keisha, they would assume that I was Black. And then they would come in for the interview and they would be kind of be a little surprised and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, that's just my name, a story of my name for a later day. But so it can be reversed, but obviously organizations are making attempts to make the hiring process more inclusive and incorporate less bias, but it's a challenge. Even some of the computer systems are being re-looked at, reevaluated, because they can tend to screen out too much. So something to think about, your hiring process. Is it consistent? Is it standard? Is it fair? Also retention. Again, if people are perceiving a lot of bias at work, a lot of, not suitable for work jokes, a lot of micro inequities, microaggressions, they're more likely to say they're planning to leave their current job, right? And everybody can look on their phones when they have a break, when they're at lunch. It also can impact the workplace in terms of opportunities for growth. 80% of the 1 million people who left during 2020, during the pandemic, were women because statistically, women are still the majority of caregivers. So if my child is sick or we're homeschooling or my parent is sick, it was usually the women. So they didn't have that flexibility. And that's why it's so important as we've kind of gradually shifted into a more flexible workplace that we are considering some of those elements that at different times in our lives we need different things. So if you are thinking about your hiring process now and thinking, what can I do? Um, Start with your job posting. Make sure that it's not conveying any stereotypes. Use inclusive words. We want to appeal to a diverse applicant pool. Write concise job announcements. There's a statistic that says, I forget the numbers exactly. If you've heard it, let it me know in the chat. That men will apply regardless if they qualify for at least 40% of the job qualifications, and women will only apply if they're 70% or more of the job qualifications. So making sure that when you do those job announcements, they're not looking for a purple unicorn. A lot of companies these days are reconsidering how much education is needed for some of the roles that they're hiring for, because not everybody's had equal opportunities to pursue extended education. So that's something you might want to consider. Really focusing in on the skills and the outcomes rather than, again, the background, the education, how many years they've been in the position. There used to be a meme that was going around, do you need 7 years for an entry level job of experience? So a lot of companies are reevaluating some of those things. Also consider, who are you reaching out to? What job boards are you going to? Are you working with your workforce development board? Central Valley would be a great one to look at some alternative, recruitment opportunities and job fairs, so that you are casting a wider net. Also, as I mentioned when we were talking about statistics, um, the applicants want to see what companies' purpose and values are, especially our younger generation, Gen Z. They really want to work in positions and jobs that align with their own values. There's nothing like working for a company where you don't have the same kind of values that they're pursuing. So in your job posting, state what is your company's purpose, what are your values, and if diversity and inclusion is really important in your organization, put it on your job posting for sure, because then you're going to attract those people that's important to them. Also, have a structured and fair interview process. At CEA, we always have a consistent set of questions for every job position that we're interviewing. Every candidate, we're utilizing those same questions. Also consider the hiring managers that you're working with. Do they know what they should be saying and asking and not saying and asking? You might want to do a little refresh of that if you're getting some inconsistencies or some feedback on those. So that's another training altogether as well we could go into. Some additional barriers, again, I mentioned, but sometimes, we're in a really crazy time in our society and our economy. So our senior leaders, this might not be top of mind, but it really does impact that supported, that engaged, that inclusive work environment. So how can we talk to them to convince them that this is really important? Sometimes things are happening within the workplace, and we're sweeping things under the rug, but we really need to bring it to the forefront. Maybe we haven't had any training on diversity and inclusion and how important it is. Maybe we haven't really reinforced what's in our employer handbook about our codes of conduct, our policies and procedures. Just even establishing that foundation of respect within your organization can help you build upon that. Some people are resistant to change. They have a certain way of thinking of what diversity and inclusion is. So it's important that you share what your company's values are in regards to that. And then, hopefully we all have an employer handbook, but we all have policies and procedures. But are we walking the walk? Are all your managers reinforcing the conduct? Because if you are in a position of leadership, you have to know that you are in a fishbowl, that employees are looking to you to set the tone, to be the role models, to walk the walk. So if they, hear their manager using inappropriate language or, letting things slide that are going against the policies and practices, that's going to be a red flag for employees. And it's not creating that supportive, healthy, inclusive work environment. And then again, when we're sweeping things under the rug, that can lead to us just not communicating when we are having challenges, when we are having differences. So we need to create that safe environment so people can share when they're having an issue with someone, when they're having a challenge, when they have some solutions for some issues that may be occurring. When we have that open communication, when we're regularly talking with our employees and teams, that builds that trust, that builds that respect amongst others. And interestingly, back during the part of the Great Resignation, remember that, back in 2021, there was some research done on what creates an unhealthy work environment. What are the signs of toxicity? And a father and son research team actually did some research, and they reviewed over 1.3 million Glassdoor reviews. And if you're not familiar with Glassdoor, it's a website where you can go and share information about companies, how their interviewing process is. The employees themselves can rate their leaders, their CEOs, and they can share when they leave those companies. So these were based on the comments that people, when they left during the Great Resignation, the top reasons that they were citing. And the first one was incivility and disrespect. That is the foundation. You have to keep at it. It's an everyday pursuance that we're maintaining civility and respect within our work environment so that people can truly thrive and not just survive. Number two was not non-inclusive environment, right? Creating that environment where people don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they're not connecting with each other. Number three was unethical behavior, so really not aligning with policies and procedures and what our values are. And number four, excuse me, was cutthroat competition, right? Really those microaggressions and micro inequities when we're competing against each other, when we're not building that supportive team, we're building against each other, we're playing the blame games. We might be even sabotaging people's work so that we get what we want. And number five is bullying at work, right? And that's included in harassment prevention training because it is so prominent. I believe the current statistic there's actually an institute, I believe it's still there, Bullying Workplace Institute reported that 30% of people have reported being bullied at work, and 75% of people have reported observing people being bullied at work. So I would imagine maybe that 30% is a little higher, but people weren't sharing or maybe weren't aware that what was happening or they were experiencing was actually bullying. So we don't want any of this. We want to be able to create or cultivate that diverse and inclusive and respectful workplace. So what does that mean? What are some things that we can focus on um, that would really lean towards a more inclusive work environment? And this is from a different survey, which is a little more recent, back in just in 2024. And this was a group of organizations that are really investing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And their top three goals for creating that diverse and inclusive workplace were building that culture of trust, right? As I said, it has to be the foundation. Employees need to know who they can go to, who they can share issues or problems, because there's always going to be issues that come up at work. There's always going to be differences of opinion. If you build that trust with your employees, then they start to thrive as teams, not just as individuals, because of that feeling of support, that feeling of belonging, that feeling that people know what I do best as well. Another one was trying to remove those biases, right? That can become habits. That if we're not self-aware and if we're not actually monitoring ourselves and having that growth mindset of, oh gosh, did I say the wrong thing? Can really get in the way, can really impact the work environment, right? All of those stereotypes, all of those microaggressions, behaviors, actions really add up to how an environment thrives or not thrive. And then the last one was focusing on retaining the right talent, right? Because we want those people who are going to contribute to that inclusive environment, and really make that difference. So it starts with building that foundation of respect. What that entails is really recognizing we come to work from different backgrounds and we all have different points of view. We're all individuals, right? We're all bringing those different experiences, whether it's, where we grew up, who our parents were, even just being in different work industries gives us a different perspective and different point of view. So showing that, how does that show up at work? How do we show that we value those differences and those different points of view? Giving each other space to be different. We were in a conversation the other day at work about micromanagers, and someone was admitting kind of they were a micromanager, and when they were training an employee on something, and then the employee was actually applying what they had learned, they were doing a few things differently, but they were getting great results. And the manager had to kind of take a step back and say, well, gosh, I don't really, that's not the way I showed them. That's not the instructions I gave. But recognizing that that person just had a different style of doing it, a different way of doing it, but they were still getting excellent results. So giving each other space to be a little different, to do things a little differently, have a different opinion, can add value and again increase the opportunities for innovation and creativity. And then everybody likes to be valued, right? And recognized for how we contribute. That really can be a motivator if we know the why. Why does what I do really hit the bottom line? What am I doing that really has a sense of value? And employees do want feedback. They want to know what they're doing well so that they can continue to do it. And they also want to know what areas they can improve upon so they can continue to succeed in their roles and positions. Anybody here overvalued, over recognized? Let me know in the chat. I can't take another compliment. Um, it's something we can all work on, and it's not giving everybody a trophy. It's really citing those individual contributions as we observe them. Positive communication is so important. What we say, how we say it, really can create a work environment, healthy or not healthy. And then again, if you are in a position of management or leadership, that consistent and fair treatment. Employees are always noticing if someone got a little extra, slice of something, the Taco Thursday, is everybody getting an equal share? And it's also, role modeling. What we value here. We value consistency, fair treatment. Being able to listen is really a gift that we give to others. And it's really hard these days, right? Because our minds are just thinking of so many things going on in our lives, in the world. We really want to focus on how can we communicate effectively with our teams. Because again, the way leaders and team members communicate with each other sends strong signals about what is valued or what isn't valued, right? If we're valuing inclusivity, we really want to create that environment, then we have to create safe spaces for people to be able to share their ideas, to feel safe. So some tips on that is really focusing on learning the facts, not making those assumptions. And with all the different modes of communication that we have these days, especially our default, which is email, well, gosh, do we make a lot of assumptions about things before learning the facts? We jump to a conclusion before we actually ask that person who is communicating that information what they meant, what they're really meaning. Soliciting questions can help us clarify and find the facts, get to the truth. Again, putting on that open mind, that growth mindset. Sometimes we've worked with people a long time. We think we know them. We think we assume we know what they're going to do or say. And we want to still have an open mind with those people, and allow them to show us something different. Staying in the present moment can help us to really engage with that other person, to listen to what that person's saying, to share empathy. And, whatever you can do to resist, if this is like me, I already admitted I have a hard time sometimes interrupting because we want to get our thought out really fast, right? Before we lose that thought, we want to interrupt. but it can send the wrong message to people. So resisting that urge to interrupt and also just really focusing on what that person is saying, what they're communicating, what is the message that I need to be hearing right now. When we are able to be face to face, maintaining positive body language, again, we want to create that psychological safety at work, so people feel safe. Some of the ways we can do that is establishing what is accepted, right? What are the shared norms? How are we going to behave in meetings, right? I remember being at the retail, the hospitality, where we weren't allowed to have our cell phones, but the two people in charge always had their cell phones. And of course, they were important. They had people calling them. But it was just kind of, what is expected of you is not expected of us. So let's establish what are the shared norms. Listening effectively, giving people space. We do bring our emotions to work. So giving each other space, maybe when there is a disagreement or we are engaging in a conflict, and really trying to communicate with empathy and show people grace, which means giving them the opportunity, to express themselves, and put ourselves in their positions before we jump to those conclusions and assumptions about them. Really embrace diversity, differences. What a boring world it would be if we were all the same, talk the same way, look the same way. So what are some behaviors we can really demonstrate that to our employees, that we embrace diversity, addressing problems that come our way immediately, because that really plays into whether we're creating that healthy, inclusive environment or not, whether we're hearing people, whether we're really actively listening, including people's opinions, even if we might disagree at first with them. And also, in the terms of giving people grace, accepting that we're all human. We are not robots yet, and we are going to make mistakes. We're going to say the wrong things. But if we can talk about it and apologize, that's the best way forward. As an individual contributor, people think, well, what can I do in terms of, I work in a larger organization or a larger business. I'm not a leader, I'm not a manager. Using your best judgment, right? Really learning more about people, about their work styles. Don't normalize bias. Don't just go along with the herd. Show yourself to be an ally through your actions, through your behavior, through your communication. Make sure that you're representing and adhering to the established norms. Speak up for yourself, when you are being challenged or when you are experiencing a micro inequity. Find the words, find the way to communicate how you're feeling and how the other person can rectify that. And ask people how you can be supportive. If you see someone overwhelmed, having a bad day, check in on them. And we are going to do this on occasion. What if I say the wrong thing? Understand that it's normal. Again, our unconscious bias, when we say things that might possibly offend someone, or impact someone, we have to own it and apologize, right? That's the best way to go. When we identify that we did make that error, it's an opportunity to really learn from it, and create that great growth mindset. And how could I do things differently? And how can I be more aware of how I impact people? What impact do I have on others by what I say, by my behavior? So it just really builds your own self confidence and self awareness, when you learn more about that idea or that individual or group that you made an assumption about, you made a quick judgment about. You can improve, you can change that habit and move forward. And lastly, if there's one thing to take away with diversity and inclusion, it's that the rules have changed. It used to be the golden rule, where we treat others the way we want to be treated, but I think by now we all agree we're all different. So we want to treat others the way they want to be treated. And that starts with building that trust, building that respect, so that we get to know people, their work style, how they're able to really thrive in a workplace rather than just survive. None of us want that. We want to do our best work. When we're in the job, we really do want to do our best work and excel, and have that support and feel that we are contributing to the overall success of the organizations that we work for. So, moving forward, what is one thing you learned or relearned or refreshed today that you can take action on to continue to cultivate that diverse and inclusive workplace? While you think about that, I'm going to pass it back over to Stephanie so she can wrap up today's session.
Thank you so much, Keisha. That was a lot of fantastic information. Just a reminder today, you guys all have a free HR hotline service brought to you by the Central Valley HR Hotline. The numbers are in the handouts that were provided to you, so make sure you have those handy. I'm going to go ahead and put your HRCI and SHRM codes in the chat box for those of you looking for continuing education credits from HRCI. Your number is 720216, and your SHRM code is 25-TZGA6. And again, those are in the chat box as well if you need them. And here's the survey that I mentioned at the beginning. I promise it's super short. It will not take you long to complete. There's a QR code. You can snap a picture of it with your phone. And I will put a link to it in the chat box as well. Oh, Jocelyn, I saw your note that you were a little late asking about the handouts. Send me your email in the chat box and I'll make sure you get a copy of those after this. I can put them directly in your inbox. So yes, thank you so much for everybody. Again, we would love your feedback. Tell us what you loved about the presentation. Tell us what presentations you'd like to hear in the future. And please have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Again, thank you, Keisha, for all that wonderful information. Bye, everybody.